Why yawns spread. You may have noticed that simply seeing someone yawn can make you yawn too. Sometimes, even reading the word yawn is enough to trigger the feeling. It seems strange because you are not necessarily tired, bored, or lacking sleep. Your brain is reacting to another person's behavior almost as though it were your own. One explanation involves social mirroring. Human brains constantly observe the expressions, movements, and emotions of other people. This helps us understand what others may be experiencing without requiring them to explain it. When someone smiles, we may smile slightly. When someone speaks quietly, we often lower our own voice. And when someone yawns, the brain may automatically prepare the same action. Contagious yawning also appears to be connected with social awareness. People are generally more likely to copy the yawns of people they know than those of complete strangers. However, the exact relationship between yawning and empathy is still debated, and contagious yawning should not be treated as a test of how caring someone is. Yawning itself may help regulate alertness. The deep breath, facial stretch, and brief change in physical state may help the brain transition between levels of attention. This could explain why yawning happens not only before sleep, but also after waking, during boredom, before stressful events, or when concentration begins to fade. So when a yawn moves through an entire room, it is not simply a group of people becoming tired at exactly the same moment. It is an example of how closely human nervous systems respond to one another, often before conscious thought becomes involved. Why we talk to ourselves. Talking to yourself can look unusual from the outside. You may quietly repeat instructions, rehearse a conversation, complain about a mistake, or say the name of an object you are trying to find. Yet private speech is not necessarily a sign of confusion. In many situations, it is a practical tool the brain uses to organize thoughts. Thoughts can be vague and unfinished. They may exist as images, feelings, fragments, or competing possibilities. Turning a thought into spoken language forces it into a clearer sequence. Instead of thinking about 5 things simultaneously, you create one sentence at a time. This can make difficult tasks feel more manageable. Children often speak aloud while solving puzzles or learning new skills. They may say things like, "This one goes here," or "No, try the other side." As people grow older, much of this speech becomes internal. It turns into the silent inner voice that accompanies planning and decision-making. But under stress, fatigue, or intense concentration, that inner speech may become audible again. Using your own name can create psychological distance. Saying, "Daniel, slow down and think," may feel different from saying, "I need to slow down." It briefly allows you to view yourself as another person who needs guidance. Athletes, performers, and students sometimes use this technique to control attention and reduce emotional reactions. Talking to yourself can also support memory. Naming an item while searching for it helps the brain focus on its defining features. Repeating a phone number keeps it active for a few more seconds. The behavior only seems pointless when speech is viewed as something meant exclusively for communication with others. In reality, language is also a system the brain uses to communicate with itself. Why doorways make us forget. You walk into another room with a clear purpose. Then, almost immediately, the purpose disappears. You stand still, look around, and wonder why you came there. Returning to the previous room sometimes causes the memory to reappear. This experience is often called the doorway effect. It does not mean that doorways literally erase memories. Instead, it may happen because the brain organizes experience into separate events. Moving from one location to another signals that one scene has ended and a new one has begun. Imagine carrying groceries into a kitchen. The brain treats the journey through the hallway as one event and entering the kitchen as the beginning of another. Information connected to the previous event becomes slightly less accessible because attention is now being redirected toward the new surroundings. This system is normally useful. Without it, every detail from the previous hour would compete equally for your attention. The brain needs boundaries so it can separate one conversation, task, location, or goal from another. A doorway is simply a strong physical boundary. The effect becomes more noticeable when the original intention was weak. You may have casually decided to get a charger while thinking about several unrelated things. Because the goal was never strongly encoded, the change of environment is enough to push it out of immediate awareness. Returning to the previous location can restore the original mental context. Seeing the desk, computer, or empty battery symbol may reactivate the thought that led you to leave. One way to reduce the problem is to say the goal aloud before moving. I am going to get the charger. The sentence strengthens the memory and gives the brain an additional cue. Forgetting at a doorway is therefore not evidence that memory is failing. It is often a side effect of the brain efficiently dividing life into manageable scenes. Why we laugh at the wrong time. Laughter usually communicates amusement, but people also laugh during arguments, embarrassing moments, medical appointments, serious conversations, and frightening situations. This can seem rude or insensitive, especially when nothing about the situation is actually funny. Nervous laughter often appears when the body is carrying more emotional tension than it knows how to express. The nervous system is highly activated, but the person may be trying to remain calm, polite, or socially controlled. Laughter becomes a release valve. It briefly changes breathing, relaxes facial muscles, and interrupts the intensity of the moment. It may also serve as a social signal. A nervous laugh can silently communicate, I am uncomfortable, but I am not a threat. People sometimes smile while apologizing or laugh after making a mistake because they are trying to soften the interaction. Unfortunately, others may interpret the same expression as a lack of seriousness. Humans do not have completely separate facial responses for every possible emotion. Fear, excitement, embarrassment, relief, and amusement can produce overlapping physical reactions. A person on a roller coaster may scream and laugh almost simultaneously. Someone who narrowly avoids an accident may begin laughing once they realize they are safe. This reaction is often automatic. Telling someone to stop laughing may make the laughter stronger because the effort to suppress it creates even more tension. The person becomes aware that the reaction is inappropriate, which adds embarrassment to an already uncomfortable situation. Nervous laughter does not always reveal what someone truly thinks. A person can understand the seriousness of a moment while their body produces a conflicting response. The behavior makes more sense when laughter is seen not only as a response to humor, but also as one of the body's many methods for regulating overwhelming emotion. Why we check phones without notifications. Sometimes you pick up your phone without consciously deciding to do it. There was no vibration, sound, or visible notification. Yet your hand reaches toward the device, the screen lights up, and you check the same applications you checked only a few minutes earlier. This habit develops through unpredictable rewards. Most phone checks reveal nothing important. Occasionally, however, there is a message, interesting video, new comment, breaking story, or social invitation. Because the reward does not appear every time, the brain keeps checking to discover when it will appear next. Unpredictable rewards can create stronger habits than completely reliable ones. If every phone check produced the same result, the behavior would quickly become boring. Uncertainty gives each check a small feeling of possibility. Environmental cues also play a major role. Seeing the phone on a table can trigger the urge to touch it. Waiting in line, sitting in an elevator, reaching a difficult part of an assignment, or experiencing a few seconds of silence can all become signals to check the screen. Over time, the behavior begins before conscious thought. Phones also offer immediate relief from uncomfortable mental states. Boredom, uncertainty, loneliness, and effort can be replaced within seconds by movement, sound, novelty, or social contact. The phone does not need to provide lasting satisfaction. It only needs to remove the current discomfort briefly. Some people even experience phantom vibrations, feeling as though the phone moved when it did not. This happens because the brain becomes highly prepared to detect signals it considers important. The repeated checking may look irrational because the person knows there is probably nothing new, but the habit is not based on certainty. It is based on possibility, repetition, and the brain's preference for immediate information over an empty moment. Why we procrastinate on important tasks. People often postpone the tasks that matter most. A simple assignment can remain untouched for days, while less important activities suddenly become urgent. Someone may clean an entire room, reorganize files, watch instructional videos, or make detailed plans instead of beginning the actual work. Procrastination is commonly mistaken for laziness. In many cases, however, it is a method of emotional avoidance. The task may create anxiety, uncertainty, boredom, frustration, or fear of failure. Avoiding it produces immediate relief, and the brain learns that postponement is an effective way to escape discomfort. The problem is that the relief is temporary. As the deadline approaches, the task becomes more threatening. This creates additional anxiety, which makes starting even harder. The person is trapped in a cycle where avoidance reduces stress in the present while increasing it in the future. Perfectionism can intensify the pattern. When someone believes the first attempt must be excellent, beginning feels dangerous. An unfinished task can still be imagined as perfect. A completed task can be judged. Delaying allows the person to protect that imagined possibility. Vague tasks are especially easy to postpone. Write the report gives the brain no obvious starting action. Open the document and write one rough sentence is much easier to approach. Once movement begins, resistance often decreases because the task is no longer an unknown object in the future. Deadlines sometimes help because urgency temporarily overpowers avoidance. The person may complete several hours of work in one intense session, and conclude that pressure improves performance. In reality, pressure may simply remove every remaining option except action. Procrastination begins to make sense when it is understood as short-term mood repair. The brain is not choosing the best future outcome. It is choosing the quickest available escape from an unpleasant feeling in the present. Why we copy other people's movements. During a conversation, one person crosses their arms. A few moments later, the other person does the same. Someone leans forward, adjusts their posture, touches their face, or begins speaking more quietly, and the people around them gradually follow. This unconscious copying is known as mirroring. It happens because humans are constantly adapting to the people around them. Matching another person's movement, pace, or tone can make an interaction feel smoother and more predictable. Mirroring often increases when people feel connected. Friends may walk at the same speed, adopt similar expressions, or use the same phrases. Couples sometimes develop matching gestures after spending years together. Musicians, dancers, athletes, and coworkers also learn to coordinate their movements with remarkable precision. The behavior may help the brain understand others. Slightly reproducing another person's expression can provide information about what that expression feels like. Seeing someone tense their shoulders may cause a small change in your own body, making their discomfort easier to recognize. Mirroring does not always mean agreement or attraction. People may copy someone they are competing with, negotiating with, or carefully observing. The brain mirrors because the other person is socially relevant, not necessarily because they are liked. Conscious imitation can feel unnatural. When someone deliberately copies every movement, it becomes obvious and uncomfortable. Natural mirroring is subtle, delayed, and incomplete. One person may change posture, while the other only adjusts the angle of their head or the rhythm of their speech. Humans depend heavily on group coordination. Long before formal language, matching movement and emotion would have helped groups travel, work, respond to danger, and care for one another. Mirroring may look like meaningless imitation, but it is part of a larger system that allows separate individuals to move and communicate as a coordinated social unit. Why we look away when thinking. Eye contact is often associated with attention. Because of this, looking away during a conversation may be interpreted as boredom, dishonesty, or insecurity. But people frequently break eye contact precisely because they are concentrating. Looking at another person's face requires mental processing. The brain is reading eye movements, expressions, emotional changes, and social expectations. Even when you are not consciously analyzing these details, they consume attention. When a difficult question is asked, the brain may reduce this visual and social workload by looking at a wall, table, ceiling, or empty area. The less stimulating view makes it easier to search memory, organize language, and construct an answer. People often look away in predictable directions, although the direction should not be treated as a reliable method for detecting lies. Popular claims that looking in one direction proves someone is remembering and another proves they are inventing are not dependable. The important point is usually the reduction of visual distraction, not the exact location of the gaze. Children may solve difficult problems more accurately when encouraged to look away from the person questioning them. Adults also close their eyes when trying to remember a name, visualize a location, or listen carefully to a sound. Closing the eyes removes even more incoming information. The same principle explains why intense eye contact can make speaking more difficult. Part of the mind becomes occupied with monitoring the listener's reaction. Is the person confused, impressed, offended, preparing to interrupt? Looking away creates a brief private space for thought. Of course, avoiding eye contact can also reflect discomfort, cultural norms, personality, or social anxiety. No single interpretation fits every situation. But when someone glances away before answering, they may not be disconnecting from the conversation. They may be temporarily reducing external input so they can give the conversation more attention. Why we rewatch familiar shows. With thousands of films and television series available, people often return to stories they have already seen. They know the characters, the jokes, the conflicts, and the ending. From a purely informational perspective, there is nothing new to discover. Yet familiar entertainment can feel more appealing than an unfamiliar option. One reason is predictability. New stories require attention. The viewer must learn names, understand relationships, detect important details, and tolerate uncertainty. Familiar stories remove much of this work. You can look away, relax, or allow your attention to drift without becoming lost. Predictability can also reduce stress. In daily life, many outcomes are uncertain. Messages may be misunderstood, plans may change, and unexpected problems may appear. A familiar episode offers a world where every event is already known. Even dramatic scenes feel safe because the viewer remembers how they end. Repeated viewing can create a sense of social familiarity. Characters become associated with particular periods, routines, or emotional states. Hearing their voices may feel similar to entering a familiar room. This does not mean viewers literally confuse fictional characters with real friends. It means the brain responds positively to repeated, recognizable social patterns. Nostalgia adds another layer. A show may be connected with childhood, a previous home, a family member, or a peaceful period of life. Rewatching it partially recreates the emotional atmosphere surrounding those memories. Familiar media can also support sleep because it is engaging enough to occupy wandering thoughts but not surprising enough to demand full alertness. The viewer does not need to stay awake to learn what happens. Rewatching, therefore, is not simply a failure to find something new. It can be a deliberate form of emotional regulation. The brain is choosing certainty, familiarity, and manageable stimulation in a world that frequently provides the opposite. Why cute things make us feel aggressive. People sometimes react to extreme cuteness with strangely aggressive language. They may say they want to squeeze a puppy, pinch a baby's cheeks, or describe an animal as so adorable they cannot handle it. The person does not actually want to cause harm. The aggressive expression appears alongside affection. This reaction is sometimes called cute aggression. It may occur when a positive emotion becomes unusually intense. The brain produces an opposite-looking response that helps keep the emotional state under control. Humans show similar mixed reactions in other situations. Some people cry when they are extremely happy. Others laugh when they feel overwhelmed or smile while describing a painful memory. Emotions are not always expressed through perfectly matching behaviors. The nervous system sometimes combines opposite signals to regulate intensity. Cute features tend to include large eyes, rounded faces, small noses, soft bodies, and clumsy movements. These characteristics resemble features found in human infants. They attract attention and can activate protective, caring behavior. This response would have been useful for a species whose young require years of support. But when the caregiving response becomes extremely strong, the feeling can become almost uncomfortable. The urge to squeeze, clench the hands, or use dramatic language may bring the person back toward a more balanced emotional state. Cute aggression does not mean that affection secretly contains violence. In normal situations, the person remains aware that the animal or child must be treated gently. The aggressive language is an exaggerated expression of emotional overload rather than an intention. This is why someone may tighten their fists while looking at a tiny kitten and then carefully stroke it with one finger. The behavior seems contradictory only if emotions are expected to produce one simple reaction. In reality, the brain often uses contrast to manage feelings that are too powerful to express in a single straightforward way.